Learning Lab for today's workshop. If you have any questions along the way for our presenters, you can type them into the GoToWebinar chat box, likely found on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any tech questions, you can type them there as well. And without further ado, I will now hand it over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Ren. Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to be here today. I am very excited to share some thoughts about how to do evaluations well and emerging trends in evaluation. This is a very short session, 30 minutes. I know this content really well. I do this presentation all the time, but I don't do it in such a short period of time. So please excuse me if I talk fast. I'll try to be as clear as I can and encourage you to put questions into the chat. If there, for some reason, we aren't able to get to all of your questions, I'd be happy to answer your questions in an email after the session. So with no further ado, let's get started. My name is Jessica Pugel, and I'm the principal and founder of Working Partner. We are a strategy and evaluation firm that works with foundations, nonprofits, businesses and governments who are working in various ways to address issues to improve communities and the lives of residents that live in them. While we frequently work with individual organizations, our expertise is in building, nurturing, and evaluating the impacts of large multi-sector community collaborations. For example, we've worked with county and community leaders to develop countywide quality indicators for early childhood care. And we work with healthcare and behavioral health providers to reduce the incidence of maternal mortality within a county. So these are the types of things that we do, and evaluation and strategy are core to all of our work. And we are pleased to share, I'm pleased to share today what we've learned over the past 20 years about how to do this work well. But we don't have time actually for introductions, which I would love to do, but Ren has a little poll. Let's understand a little bit about why people are here and what you want to get out of the meeting. So Ren has the poll, and we're going to ask you to take a minute, please, to take this poll so that we know what your interests are. This will help me guide how I will, what I will focus on in the conversation. So how's it looking, Ren? Okay, what are people wanting to talk about? All of this, you're in luck, and we're going to cover all of this. A lot of people about how to identify data collect, we'll be able to cover that really well, and information on how to get started. That's great. Fantastic. Thank you very much. That helps me a lot. And once again, we're going to go over the whole process. As you have questions, please type them into the chat. So too often when I talk to people, they're like, ugh, evaluation, like it's hard for them, it's no fun, but they do it. And so evaluation is something of a slog. But what I want to make the case to you today is that there are 6 basic steps of conducting an evaluation that should take a lot of the pain away and hopefully inject some joy and great findings into this work. I've been doing evaluation work for more than 20 years and have enjoyed just about every project and have been pleased with the positive impact that evaluations can have on the work that we've done. So by the end of our session today, I expect that you will be a master of evaluation, or at least you'll feel a lot more confident, right? And you're going to learn the 6 steps of conducting an evaluation. You'll understand the trends that are driving evaluation today, and then talk about tips for developing an evaluation and plan, doing your data collection and visualizing your findings. So I would like to start first by being clear about what is evaluation. You know, a lot of times when I talk to people about evaluation, a lot of people tend to equate doing a survey with evaluation. They'll say, well, an evaluation is doing a survey to find out how we're doing. And while surveys can be an important evaluation tool, surveys alone are not enough to constitute a strong evaluation. So what is an evaluation? An evaluation is a systemic process of assessing whatever you want to assess. For today, I'm going to talk about a program, but it could be an organization, it can be a community initiative, it can be other things, right? It's a systemic process, and it not only tells you sort of what the outcomes, the value or merit of a program, but it's also super useful in helping you to improve the effectiveness of a program, to inform decisions and raise awareness, right? So I really want to focus on the systemic aspect of this, and that's where these 6 steps of the evaluation come into, right? There are many different types of evaluation theories and approaches, but almost all of them share 6 steps in conducting the evaluation. The Centers for Disease Control a long time ago formulated these into a concise program evaluation framework that is widely regarded as an effective and practical tool to guide an evaluation. While it's very simple, it allows for flexibility at step and also allows you to put the systemic into the overall process. So the 6 steps are: engage your stakeholders, create a logic model or understand your program, create an evaluation plan, collect your data, analyze and interpret your data, and share your findings. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do each of these steps. But before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about 2 trends that are shaping evaluation practice today. So the first is an increasing interest in equity in evaluation practice. So evaluation practice, I'm sorry to say, has been rightly accused of being extractive, which is to say collecting a lot of information from people without providing any kind of benefit to those participants. And it also placed the evaluator into this position of privileged knower, where the evaluator, for some reason, gets to decide what's valuable and what's not, right? So as a result, evaluation has been really working to try to begin to bring more equity into the process, bring other participants and other voices into both the implementation and decision-making around each step of the practice. And the Equitable Evaluation Initiative is a fantastic framework for those of you who want to know more about it. We All Count is a fantastic also resource for people who are trying to integrate data into their equity into their data analysis. So I encourage you to look at those if you're interested in that. And then, sort of partly as a result of the equity movement, we've also seen an increased interest in qualitative data, which once upon a time was not considered to be very rigorous. A lot of people like, oh, that's not very rigorous. But today there are many excellent and rigorous approaches to collecting qualitative data that will generate rich, interesting descriptions and assessments of your programs, much more than anything that a quantitative analysis can do. So those are the 6 steps and the key trends. So now let's talk about what that means at each step. So it may not make sense to you, but the first and most important step in evaluation is to engage your stakeholders, right? Who is involved in the evaluation and what role they need to play. And it's really important to do this because there's it's important. It helps your evaluation. It helps you focus on what you need to focus on and allows the implementation to go more smoothly. So of course you need to engage the people who also want to know why an evaluation is going to happen. For example, a lot of times, say our funder really wants to know this. And so the funder will have a lot of say in what the evaluation questions. Alternatively, it may be your board of directors, right? But there are so many other questions you need to ask. Too often, we don't think about the impact an evaluation has on staff, but we often expect staff to be a part of the data collection or something, or we don't think about what the impact will be on the clients that we're serving. So it's very important, as you're thinking through this evaluation, to engage staff at the beginning, to get their input on how you ought to collect the data, or think about what it means for the clients and what's the best way to collect data from the clients, right? Who's going to analyze the data in the world of equity that we've brought in with equity now? A lot of people are including stakeholders in the analysis phase of the work, right? And so there's ways to integrate them that helps the findings be richer. And then, who are you going to report to and what are they interested in? So engaging your stakeholders is really a critical first step, right? Another critical step that you need to do that can happen in parallel or after you engage your stakeholders is understand what you are evaluating. In this instance, let's talk about a program, right? You need to understand how the program is supposed to be implemented and the outcomes that are expected in order to be able to do a clear assessment, right? Logic models are often used as a tool to describe a program. Now, logic models have gotten very sophisticated. We see really fancy theories of change and very detailed logic models. You don't need to go for an evaluation that detailed. You need just a good basic logic model that understands what are the inputs and resources that are being applied to a program, what are the activities that are being done, and to what type of participants those activities are being done. And then your outputs are basically counts of the people who participated or counts of the classes that you offered or things like that. And then there's the outcomes, which are often a focus of the evaluation. But I want to just emphasize that the evaluation is not always just about outcome, but can be asking the question, are we using our inputs to do the activities that we said that we are going to do? Are we doing these activities with these participants the way that we expect them to do to get the outcomes? And both types of processes are valuable. And then throughout, you want to always be aware of the context in which you're working and the assumptions that you have. So having a basic logic model will help you, right, to really understand the program and then decide what is your evaluation question, right? So the establishing an evaluation question is the first step in creating an evaluation plan. The plan starts with being clear about what you want to know from the evaluation. And then once you know those questions, it becomes much easier to identify what needs to be measured and how you will collect the data. So this step of setting your evaluation question is unbelievably often overlooked. Oftentimes people start their evaluation by asking, well, what data should we collect, right? And if they do that, they'll have a bunch of data, but without being clear about what they want to know, they may not have all the data they need to answer the question, or alternatively, they've collected so much data that they get overwhelmed and they don't know how to do it. So it's very, very important to think about your evaluation question. What do you want to know versus what you need to know, right? Identify your audience and what they want to know. Consider questions that are appropriate for the stage of the intervention. If a program is really new, you don't want to be asking a lot of outcome questions, right? If you've got a very mature program, yes, outcome questions make sense, but the value of an evaluation for a new program is, are we doing what we said we were going to do? Are we serving the type of people that we are going to serve? So the question that you're going to ask might change based on who wants to know the question, right? Your sponsors are often interested in outcomes, or are your resources being used efficiently? Not many people ask this questions for the evaluation. Are we giving clients what they need for them to be able to achieve it? Program staff have it. So think about the question, and when you're thinking about the question, you need to also keep in mind who else, what are the questions that different stakeholders have and how you can integrate them. I want to emphasize that this is not just about asking all of these questions. You want to narrow it down, but you want to ask some of them. And then this then results in an evaluation plan. Once you have your evaluation question, it's much easier to think about the measures and indicators that you're going to use. And when you think about the measures you're going to use, then the data sources become a little bit more clear, or your data collection method. So this template here is a great template. It's very simple, but it's a very useful tool to use to create an evaluation plan. So I encourage you to use something like this as you put together your evaluation plan. Okay, so now you know what you want to know, and you've decided on the measures that you're going to collect. So now you need to talk about how to collect your data. I have a word of caution here. Don't try to collect everything. Too often we see people collecting all this data and then they're overwhelmed and they get kind of lost, right? So it's important to be very clear about what you want to collect. Now, surveys are often a go-to tool for evaluation, but I really want to urge you to consider other forms of data collection. Surveys today are everywhere, and as they become more ubiquitous, people are less inclined to complete them or rush through them. So oftentimes, survey results are not always useful, right? There are so let's look at other types of data collection. There's primary data collection, which is the data that you gather on your own using tools that you've created. And then there's secondary data, which involves using information and analysis that have already been conducted by both. Both of these sources of data are very, very useful. If you're going to do your own data collection, in addition, surveys, there are other qualitative kind of approaches using interviews, focus groups, case studies, and that sort of thing. Now, increasingly, as the equity starts getting going and as evaluation evolves, we're seeing a lot of wonderful arts-based methods that are very fun and effective way of getting information from people that makes them, and it tends to be a little bit more transparent. So there's really wonderful ways. In terms of secondary data, it really depends on the field. If you're in education, there are TEA, there are your local school districts are collecting lots of data. If you're in healthcare, you've got your uniform data system or hospital data that you can use. So if you're in big systems, there's probably great resources out there. And then there are other national tools that are available to also inform your evaluation. But a couple tips and tricks. First, look at the data that you already have. So often nonprofits are collecting a lot of data, but they never look at it. You could be sitting on a gold mine of your own data. If you're going to do a survey, look at data that you already have. Also look and see there are a million surveys out there. Go see if there's a survey that's already been done, that's been validated, that you can use for your purposes, right? And then consult others in the development of your data collection tools and be sure to pilot your tools, right? So when you're doing this work, I want to encourage you, there is qualitative data, which is really rich and wonderful, but it takes a long time to collect. And then there's quantitative data. And I encourage you to use a mixed methods approach to the data collection, which includes in collecting both quantitative and qualitative data, and then triangulating that data to get a full rich picture. So I love this picture here on the right side. I stole it from somebody, but it's a wonderful way of describing the importance of mixed methods. So when you do your data and collect it, it comes at the top in a big mound, all messed up, right? And so a lot of times, the first thing you'll do with qualitative data is you'll sort it, okay? You might count how many of each type that there are, and then you'll arrange it, and you might even visually present it, right? So this is all very interesting, and it can create interesting visuals, but without doing some qualitative learning and stuff like that, you may never find out that all of these pieces actually are used to create the house we see at the bottom. And it takes that qualitative component to understand it, and you understand how this data is used to be able to use the full picture. So really encourage you to use mixed methods approaches. And also, I want to encourage you to be creative in how you collect their data. Qualitative data is a lot more accepted, and there's a lot of rigorous ways of collecting data, visual qualitative data like a feedback wall that's pictured here. And collecting this is a lot more interesting, but it also creates a level of transparency to the people who are participating that increases trust in the evaluation and confidence in your results. So there's lots of really cool ways of collecting data nowadays that you ought to think about. So now you've got your data, and it's time to analyze your data. We don't have time to go into details here, but there's some key things that you need to do at this step of the work. So before you start analyzing your data, go back and look at your evaluation questions and think about how is this data going to answer your question, and organize that data in a way to answer the evaluation questions. A lot of times at this point in the process, you've done so much, you may have forgotten your evaluation question, so it's always good to go back. It's important to keep your audience in mind. If you've got a lot of quantitative data that you're going to need to share with them, how are you going to present that in a way that they're going to be able to understand it? It's super important to understand the data, the types of data that you're working with, and how you can use it. Some types of data have certain limitations, so understanding what you can get out of your data will be also very important. right? And then consider your times and resources. We love qualitative data. It's really rich and useful, but it does take a lot of time to read, code, and theme the data. So you'll want to account for that when you're the time that you need when you're doing your plan. Also, at this point, it's important to remind yourself to focus on keeping equity at the forefront of your analysis. There are lots of ways to incorporate equity into your data analysis. You can disaggregate your data by population type or program type and just understand if there are disparities in program usage or outcomes. It's important a lot of times when we're looking at data, we kind of hone in on the bad, right? It's good to keep a strength-based mindset when you're looking at it. Don't just focus on the bad, but look at the positive aspects as well. Make sure you've got diverse voices included in your data and use transparency. Just as a reminder that We All Count website is a fantastic resource for people who want to include equity in your data analysis. Okay. You've got your analysis, woohoo, and now you're ready to share your findings. But too often evaluation findings are not used. And a lot of it is because, you know, it's a 15-page, 30-page report that takes forever for people to read. A lot of times it has tables and graphs that people don't understand. And so a lot of times evaluation, it's really become important to really think about how to share your findings in a way that resonates with people and helps people to understand it, right? So you want to make sure that your findings are relevant to the audience that you're showing to, that they're clear, and so as a result, data visualization has become a really important tool to communicate your findings. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with data visualization. I happen to love this visualization. So most of these visualizations would come from Evergreen Data. Stephanie Evergreen is a data visualization guru in my world. And she was hired by a company to understand why they were not being as productive as possible. And she used this picture of the fish in a fishbowl that was the only picture that she used for result, because the findings is that the offices were cramped and people didn't have the resources or room to do it. It was very impactful, right? But there's other things that you can do. When we tend to give everybody all of the data that we have, and all you really need to do is emphasize the most important data that you want to do. We also find that mapping is an incredibly valuable and useful tool. People love to look at maps. So here we go. We've talked about the 6 steps of the evaluation, and I've talked a little bit about ways to do them to make sure that they are effective and efficient. So here's some key things that you need to keep in mind for strong and useful evaluation. Make sure to engage your stakeholders early. Consider their considerations as you're thinking through your evaluation. Ask clear and actionable evaluation questions, and use that evaluation questions to put together an evaluation plan to identify your measures, your indicators, and how you'll collect your data. Use mixed methods. Don't forget to use your existing data. Keep equity in mind at all times, both in the data collection and analysis phase, and keep your context at the center of your analysis. And then finally, share your findings in a way that's visible and accessible to your audience. So that is that, and I did it in 23 minutes. I apologize for going so quickly, but I'm happy to take questions or comments at this point. So Ren, do I turn it over to you?
Either way, just a reminder to our attendees, if you have any questions, I'm not seeing any come through yet. So if you do have any questions for Jessica, please go ahead and drop that in the Q&A panel, the Q&A section on your attendee panel. I think you may also be able to drop it in the chat.
Oops, sorry, I'll just go back.
Oh, we do have one, okay. So this question says, that was great. Do you have a list of your favorite resources like Evergreen Data that you think everyone should know?
Yep, Evergreen Data is fantastic for data visualization. As I said at the top, the Equitable Evaluation Initiative has a website for how to think about integrating equity. I really encourage you to look at that. We All Count is a great way to do that for equity and data. The American Evaluation Association is a professional association that has a lot of webinars and tools for people. So I encourage you to look at the AEA website. If you are in a state where there is an American Evaluation Association affiliate, I encourage you to be in touch with your affiliate. I'm in Chicago, and there's the Chicagoland Evaluators Association, but I'm also a member of the Seattle Evaluation Group and the Texas Evaluation Network and others. So most states have an affiliate, and they will have people who are local evaluators that can help you or point you to other resources, but those are the best resources I can offer to you. Any other questions, Ren?
Yes. I will answer the questions about getting a slide in my closing out statement. And then, because we got like 2 of those, can you share other creative results sharing methods like Photo Voice?
Yeah, so Photo Voice is a data collection method, and it takes a lot of different forms, but Photo Voice might be something like this. It's really great with kids or young adults. You ask them to take a picture. You've got a topic. How do you feel about school today, or how do you feel how well we're teaching you X? And you can ask them to go and take a picture of something that represents how they feel about it. And the kids love it because it allows them, sometimes you can ask them to go do interviews, or you can ask them to write a haiku or things like that. There's lots of different forms. These types of Photo Voice are also really great for people in behavioral health when they have a hard time using words to describe how they feel, and doing art or a picture can do it. So in fact, it's not the art itself that is the topic, but once they create it, you ask them to describe it. And once they describe it, their ability to explain how they feel about it is much richer and much clearer. So those are really fantastic tools. So you will have some beautiful pictures at the end of it that you can use to put into your report, but it's really more about how they talked about the piece of art that they created that gives you the data that you need to answer your question.
Great. And then last question for today. In some organizations I've worked with, we have struggled with leadership and widespread support for eval and learning. How can we approach this?
Yeah, it is difficult, and it's gotten a lot harder right now, right? Just the resources for evaluation are just not there as much. The thing about leaders is, and it kind of goes back to this first slide that I have about why you do it. Too often people just think, I don't want to, I don't need to worry about our outcomes. There is so much that evaluation can do to make your processes more efficient, to be able to serve more clients, to save resources. As a matter of fact, I happen to be doing a lot of evaluations right now with a social service that does a lot of food and other types of community supports, and they need to increase the number of people that they're seeing with less resources. And so we're looking carefully at their processes to figure out how to do it. So you really need to think, when you go to your leaders, you need to think about what are they interested in or concerned about, and then it help them see how evaluation can help them answer those problems. I'm sympathetic to the problem, but I think it's going to be worth it. There is so much both internal to the organization and external to the organization that an evaluation can do. Anything else, Ren?
We don't have any other questions that came in, so I think we are going to have this be the end of the presentation. If you have any final things that you want to say, Jessica, before I give my closing statement, you can go for it.
Okay, I'm sorry that I went so fast, and I hope this was useful. But look, I just want to make a case for why evaluation can be helpful to you, especially in these difficult times. I would even argue that evaluation is more important. A lot of the data that you're collecting is going to be important for you to show funders that you're having an impact. With the competition that we're seeing today for funding sources, collecting your data making sure that your program is working that it's intended to, making sure that you're getting the outcomes that you're expecting are all the more important when you're out there trying to seek funding. I know it's hard to do. It can be easier, and hopefully these steps will make it easier for you, but I really want to encourage you to integrate this work into your practices so that you can go out there and get money for the programs that you're operating.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica. This workshop has now come to a close. If you're interested in receiving the recording and materials from today's workshop, you can download them on the bottom of our free webinar page or email us at program@nonprofitlearninglab.org. Thank you so much for participating, and again, thank you, Jessica, for educating our community. Bye, everyone.
Bye.